Did you know that new businesses create almost all net job growth in America? Hello, everyone. I'm Catherine Mortensen from ALEC Public Affairs. Today, we're going to be talking about small businesses and entrepreneurs, America's engine of growth and opportunity. And really, what we want to look at specifically is how policymakers can promote people's right to start a business. So, joining me today in the studio is Gretchen Baldow. She's the ALEC Director of Commerce, let me get it right, Insurance and Economic Development Task Force. And then remotely joining us from Kansas City, Missouri is Jason Grill. Jason is with a nonprofit group called let me get it right. The Right to Start. It's right there on our banner above us. The Right to Start is an organization that is focused on helping Americans achieve their dream of small business ownership. So welcome, Jason. And of course, welcome, Gretchen. Jason, tell us a little bit about Right to Start. What is your mission? Well, first, let me just say, I did find interesting. I went to your website in doing a little research, and this is sort of the homepage of your website. It says, we are born to be starters, makers, doers, dreamers. I love that. And I'd love for you to tell us just more about that and what your group's mission is.
Right. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me today. We believe that you should try to unleash entrepreneurial opportunity for all in this country. And Right to Start is seeking to do that. We're seeking entrepreneurial opportunity for all and trying to reduce barriers for people to start. We believe the right to start is something that every American has. And we think that government and those who are in charge of our communities should make it easier for folks to pursue their dreams and encourage them to start. So that's kind of why we're here. We have three different buckets that we work in. One is changing communities, one is changing minds, and one is changing policies. I know we're going to get into the changing policies today, but we are a great advocacy and education nonprofit who is working to support people and entrepreneurs and young companies that grow the fastest. And we'll get into that as well.
Great.
And Jason, so you spoke earlier this year to our members at the ALEC annual meeting in July. During your presentation, you showed a graphic that illustrated how important small businesses, also entrepreneurs, are to job creation. Can we take a look at that now? Perfect, right up there.
Yeah, this is exciting. I'm excited to talk about this graph.
Perfect. Can you go into a little more detail about the story behind these numbers?
Yeah, so great question. One thing that Right to Start is working on is trying to educate and change people's minds so they understand truly what actually is happening. And one of these things is located here on this graph. Not many folks, only 18% of voters currently know that new businesses create almost all net new job growth in our country. So if you look at this graph, it shows net job creation by firm age. The blue line is companies are companies under 5 years of age. You can see it's higher up on the graph. You can see that it goes up and down, but it's mostly up. These are the people that we're focused on. These are companies under 5 years old. They create the most net new jobs. Companies that are between 5 and 9 years old usually stay steady. They don't show much movement, but older companies that are 10 plus years old typically shed jobs over time. So we are out there trying to really share this with policymakers and stakeholders and leaders that you have young companies in our country who are creating the most net new jobs for your economy, for your city, for your state, for the United States. However, as policymakers, we focus more on the older businesses, the ones that actually shed jobs over time, whether that's through economic development, incentives, encouraging those folks where we should be investing a little bit of our time and effort into making it easier for those folks who are under 5 years old to start and grow because they are creating the most net new jobs in our economy. These are the job makers.
So, Jason, it's clear from the data that the new jobs are coming from these small businesses, startups, entrepreneurs. But your research also indicates that starting a small business has benefits beyond just job creation. And I want to put up another slide and have you explain to us what are some of the other benefits that we get as a society, as a country, from these small businesses and startups?
Yes, for sure. So new businesses, as we talked about, create homegrown jobs in a community, whether that's a rural community, an urban community. They grow GDP, which is something that, as at ALEC, you obviously are very supportive of. Increase lifetime incomes over time for not only individuals but families. That in turn leads to increased community wealth in communities throughout our country. It also allows for different goods and services in a community or in a state or city. And finally, one of the exciting things is it fights inequality and poverty. The more entrepreneurs that grow in community, the less poverty you will have in that community, which is something that many cities and states struggle with throughout our country. So these are some of the things that are that come out of growing your young companies and your entrepreneurs in your community.
Thank you.
So the sad truth in America is, of course, that we've been in a startup slump for decades now. Catherine's going to share a slide now. And this slide is going to show that over the past 4 decades, the startup rate has dropped from 14%, so 14%, all the way down to 8%. Can you explain, why that rate is dropping and what is that all about?
Yeah, so people think that the United States is an entrepreneurial country, and just the data does not show that. You see Shark Tank, you read about all these tech entrepreneurs in the media, but for the most part, we have been in a startup slump. It has gone up this graph as of COVID because of people being forced to start their own businesses during that time. However, it's remained pretty steady now after that. So this is because honestly, there's so many issues that entrepreneurs face, and to starting, whether that's insufficient capital, whether that's fear of failure, whether that's government fees, whether that's government making it harder for businesses to start, whether that's loss of healthcare. There's so many factors, and we can get into those more. But all of these things add up like pebbles in a stream. And those pebbles, if you have one, it's fine. The water keeps flowing. But if you have 15 to 20 to 30 to 40 to hundreds of pebbles in the stream, the water will quit flowing. And all of these things added up have caused the startup slump in our country.
Jason, I went ahead, sorry to interrupt. I put up another slide that shows some of the reasons people don't move forward with their dream to start a small business.
Yeah, and this is a great example of things that are issues, and a lot of these, as you can see, are dealing with things that government impacts, whether that's the fees at the beginning. The United States of America is one of the highest countries in the world for government fees, whether that's a license fee, a registration fee, compared to other countries throughout the world. I think we're on average about $800 to start a business, and in other countries it's $50, $100, or even nothing. And one thing that we believe is people should try to be encouraging people to start businesses. We see through this data that young companies create the most net new jobs, yet we have a barrier to entry for people at the very beginning when they're just starting, when they need capital, when they need customers. Any kind of fee or cost hurts them actually, and so it discourages business growth, which goes back to that startup slide. So that is a list that that we're working to hopefully educate policymakers, educate entrepreneurs, so they can take those issues to their policymakers and change that, because we could have so many more young companies starting in our country if we lowered the barriers to entry and reduce them to hopefully zero at some point.
And Jason, I want to just note that some of the data you've shared with us shows that 8 in 10 small business owners believe that government favors big business.
Mm-hmm.
And 7 in 10 don't think the government cares about them at all. These are terrible numbers. They reflect terribly on our policymakers and what's happening with our state and local and federal governments. It sounds to me like what we need here is, and what your group, exactly what you're doing, is we need to focus on the policymakers. How can we change policies to be more encouraging to small business and entrepreneurs? So I'll let you talk about that. So, what needs to happen there?
Yeah, those numbers are frightening, and frankly, that's why a lot of entrepreneurs haven't been engaged in the system. And one of the things Right to Start is doing through our advocate network is actually having entrepreneurs who are on the ground, whether they're restaurant owners, whether they are working in the software industry, whether they're a Main Street entrepreneur, whether they're a rural entrepreneur, to connect with their policymakers. A lot of people think that their elected officials just don't listen to them, but it's actually their job to listen to their constituents. And but entrepreneurs are busy building their businesses. They haven't really taken the time, to get out and actually communicate with policymakers. So one of the things we're trying to do is connect them, so they start actually sharing what issues they're dealing with policymakers. What are their pain points? What do they think would help them grow faster? And getting them on the menu and actually at the table. So that's something that we're really excited about, because there hasn't really been anyone or an organization kind of organizing and trying to get entrepreneurs to get engaged in the policymaking process. So we're very excited about that. And frankly, when a legislator, a policymaker, a city council person, a state legislator, a congressperson hears about some of these things that affect their own community, their own entrepreneurs, their own districts, they tend to try to listen more, and they tend to try to help them. And it's just making sure they're at the table and building the bridge for communication, which is one of the things we're working on.
So we've heard a lot about now all the kind of hurdles that are facing entrepreneurs in America, issues that are preventing people from accessing the American dream. I love that image you had of pebbles in a stream building up to create a dam that stops people. So let's talk about policy solutions now. There is a Right to Start Act, and in 2022, it and related policy recommendations were filed or passed in Missouri, Hawaii, Kansas, Florida, and Oklahoma. Can you tell us more about this act?
Yes. So what we have a policy field guide on our website, righttostart.org, which lists out policy recommendations and data for on the local, state, and federal level. And so we've met with policymakers. We give speeches around the country, and they basically can pick the ideas they like, the ideas they think would work in their state or their city or on the federal level, and try to alleviate some of these barriers. So in Missouri, for instance, a legislator selected, 5 to 6 things he started with. That was whittled down to 2 or 3 in the bill that passed in the House and the Senate. So, it's up to the state and the legislator to pick what they would like to move forward on. However, most of these ideas are very easy to understand. They're mostly non-controversial, and I think they really help states and cities grow faster. So Gretchen, I don't know if I'm going to go through all of them in our short time, but I will just point out that we have ideas such as 5% to start, which is essentially trying to reach a goal of 5% of all government contracts to go to companies under 5 years old. We have the same policy recommendation with economic development and workforce development. We also believe states and cities should have a office of entrepreneurship, or one person in their state that is a concierge to the entrepreneur and young company community to help them go through that difficult permitting process, to teach them and tell them what they need to do to become a business and to do it faster. And at some point, hopefully, those people can lower the barriers and could reduce the amount of steps you have to take to get a business started. We believe in zero barriers to start. We believe in reducing licensing issues. We believe in cutting or reducing tax hassles and early taxes for young companies. Again, they need to be focused on getting customers, and every dollar that they have in their pocketbook will help them. And so we believe in that. Non-compete reform we've talked about and worked on in the past. Small business bill or borrows bill of rights, healthcare reform. Like, there's so many issues, but there are some that are very easy for cities and states to do. And that's part of our model legislation, which we're going to be presenting at the ALEC conference here soon. And I'm very excited about that, because that Right to Start Model Act legislation has kind of a menu of options for folks to choose from. And it involves things that should be very non-controversial and easy for them to take hold, and actually would have a huge effect on young company growth and entrepreneurs in their city and state and on the federal level.
Well, thanks so much, Jason, for what you're doing, because I come from a family of a lot of small business owners and entrepreneurs. And so I definitely know their struggles and challenges, and there are many. If you're trying to get a license, I have like a sister-in-law who had a daycare business in her home, and then she ended up moving to another small business, and she's an entrepreneur, and she's always facing red tape, mostly from her state government, and I think even the federal, but it just seems like it never ends. But so I'm excited that you will be bringing your Right to Start Act to the ALEC States and Nation Policy Summit later this month.
Mhm.
And you'll be presenting it to our members. Of course, they come from all 50 states. And the idea is it could be adopted as an ALEC model policy if enough of our members like it. So, Gretchen, can you explain what that process looks like? How does this draft legislation that Jason brings, what's the process for it to become an ALEC model policy?
Absolutely. So you're correct in that ALEC always acts as a forum. We bring together the public sector, the state legislators, and we bring together the private sector. And these are people who are interested in these issues. We create that forum for them to come together and have these conversations. So we have a legislative sponsor for the Right to Start Act, and they will be sponsoring that in the task force meeting. And they'll present it to the task force for consideration, up for debate. It ultimately has to pass the public sector and the private sector and then go up to the ALEC Board of Directors for final approval. So it's a very deliberative and collaborative process, so people can share the idea and hear other perspectives from different states, from the public side and from the private side as well. So it will be up in December for vote, and we'll see what happens.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, Jason, is there anything that's important that maybe we haven't touched on? I did have one last screen that maybe you want to address. This kind of shows us your mission statement as an organization. Perhaps you'd want to talk about that right now?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Are you bringing it up?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. This is a great slide. And it's very brief. So these are the three things that we're focused on at Right to Start on our team. Changing minds. So we believe that in order for people to understand that young companies create the most net new jobs and to hear the entrepreneurial stories and struggles and things that they've been successful at as well, you need to lift their voices through storytelling and media. So we do national op-eds. We've been the CEO and founder of Right to Start has been written op-eds in Inc. magazine, in the Atlantic. He's been in The Hill. He's been all over Forbes. And we believe in changing that. We also believe in telling those stories through op-eds for our entrepreneurs in their local markets. People need to see kind of what they're dealing with and hear their stories. And the more and more we do that, I think the more and more entrepreneurship and young company ideas will raise to the forefront. Because frankly, as I told you before, most people think that the United States is not in a startup slump. And they don't understand that young companies create the most net new jobs. So we need to get out there and share that message. The second one on that list was changing policies. We talked about that. So Right to Start has a policy field guide on its website, righttostart.org. We have issues and resources for policymakers on all levels of government. And we're engaging with them with organizations like yours to share that message, and hopefully Right to Start Act will make it through the ALEC model legislation, and hopefully that'll be shared by Gretchen and others throughout many states throughout our country with people who understand that we need to make it easier for companies to start and grow. And then we also change communities. So we organize and mobilize citizens to take action. We have an ambassador network that is growing throughout this country with ambassadors who are leaders in their community. And then we also have an advocate network, which is the entrepreneurs on the ground in their community. And these two things really help impact all of these things, whether it's the changing minds through the op-eds and through the storytelling, whether it's the changing policies, or whether it's changing a community through activating a network of entrepreneurs and leaders. So we're very excited about what we've accomplished in the last 2 to 3 years. And now it's just traveling around the country and making sure people are aware of these issues and engaging our ambassadors and advocates in their markets to go to the table and talk to entrepreneurs and talk to policymakers. So we have a lot of education to do, and we're excited about it.
Jason, as we close out, what is the website that people can go to for more information on your organization?
So the website is righttostart.org, and everything's on there, and there's all these different ways to engage and more information about why this is such an important issue in our communities and our country.
Thank you for the great work you're doing. I could not be more excited to share this message, because I believe so profoundly in the need to have these startup businesses and entrepreneurs, and to get government regulations out of the way. Any final thoughts, Gretchen?
I couldn't agree more. America is the country of the American dream. We need to encourage people to keep pursuing that dream, and any barriers we can lift to help people along their journey, I'm fully behind them.
Yeah, same. So it's lovely conversation, Jason. It was so nice to meet you. And thank you again for all that you're doing. And we will see you next time on another episode of ALEC TV.
Thank you.